Jay Lee, UCLA Thoracic Surgery. I'm the surgical director of the Thoracic Oncology program at UCLA. I've been heavily involved in the clinical trials in the early stage space, both neoadjuvant or adjuvant trials or perioperative trials for both targeted therapies and immunotherapy drugs. At the World Congress for Lung Cancer in 2025, my focus and my discussions were on the ALK-positive non-small cell lung cancer space for early stage disease. In the educational session, I provided an overview of the ALK landscape in early stage disease. And at the current time, there's been readout of 5 phase 2 studies that have looked at second generation ALK TKIs. And some of the studies are small numbers. The ones that have received the most attention are the 2 current ones that read out this year, which is NAUTIKA-1 and ALNEO. And then I also discussed about 2 real-world data sets with first generation crizotinib, and then 1 real-world data set that looked at crizotinib and alectinib in the real-world use of these drugs in the neoadjuvant space. And the overall arching take-home message is we see robust pathologic regression as well as objective response rates by RECIST, that both radiographically and pathologically we're seeing impressive results, signals of efficacy. But these signals of efficacy, including nodal downstaging, pathologic nodal downstaging, this has not been correlated with long-term survival. And it's going to be difficult to show that because standard of care is adjuvant targeted therapy for several years, 2 years, based on ALENA. So, but I do think that these phase 2 and real-world studies do show signals of high efficacy with even second-generation drugs, particularly second-generation drugs, because that's what all the phase 2 trials that have currently read out on. There are 3 phase 3 adjuvant trials with ALK TKIs. Alchemist is one of these trials that looked at crizotinib, and the Alchemist for the ALK-positive cohort was discussed here at World Lung this year. And unfortunately, that was a negative trial. It did not meet its primary endpoint of DFS. And this is a drug that is really not utilized or has largely been supplanted by the second generation and third generation drugs in the metastatic space. In the early stage setting, ALENA has received approval and has become the standard of care in the United States. So the role of crizotinib really is not established in an early stage setting, but we would have expected some impact on disease-free survival. However, it was a negative trial and the hazard ratio is about 1. And the potential reasons for that are twofold. One, it's a first generation ALK TKI, and these have no penetration into the CNS, which means there's no CNS protection. So the number of events due to brain metastases are going to occur in high frequency in both the control arm as well as the treatment arm. So the efficacy of that drug is less, and we know it's less from the metastatic disease trials that went head-to-head against second-generation drugs or even third-generation drugs, that the first-generation drugs just don't work as well. And so it's difficult to show that efficacy in the adjuvant setting. And it was relatively a smaller study, even though it's a phase 3 trial. The other 2 phase 3 trials in the adjuvant space, one is ALENA, which we all know about, and established the standard of care for alectinib to be used in the adjuvant setting. And the third trial is currently being investigated with insertinib in China, which is a second-generation drug. I failed to mention the second reason why Alchemist may have been negative, and it's also the delay to get that systemic targeted therapy on board, because patients were allowed to get adjuvant chemotherapy, and there were patients that were out nearly a year out before they got the adjuvant crizotinib, which is again one of the rationales for why we need to move up the targeted therapies into the neoadjuvant space, because Some patients are going to have some inherent difficulty recovering from surgery, going through chemotherapy and dealing with adverse events. I needed a washout period from the chemotherapy, and then finally starting the ALK TKI. And it was upwards of 11 months on the Alchemist trial where some patients didn't get the crizotinib until much further out. So I think both of the CNS penetration issue as well as the timeline, the inherent timeline of an adjuvant trial, both weighed into why that was a negative study.